Hack is commenting, would you consider science communicator a career? What skills would be most important? I absolutely think it's a career. It's a career that's changed its character a bit over time. I mean, back in the day, it was like, I'm a science journalist for a newspaper. Then in the US, at least, not in all countries, but in the US at least, kind of for whatever reason, newspapers stopped being a place where people would absorb sort of science content. And then what started off was, YouTube channels, blogs, things like this. And there are absolutely people who are now making a living being science communicators, having popular YouTube channels, having popular Substacks, things like this, and in some cases, writing books that still go the traditional way in bookstores and so on. So yes, it's absolutely a thing. Again, different rhythm. Whether it's you're writing books, they take 2 years each to write. You go through publishing companies, things like that, or you're making a YouTube channel and you're going direct to consumers, so to speak, and building up a following there, and such like. Whether you're doing that as I'm just expressing myself, or whether you're doing that as an interviewer of people, building up kind of a more like an interview channel. I think that what does it take to do these things? I mean, the personalities of people in these different areas are a bit different. So, there are people who write books where when you meet them in person, they don't say very much. It's like all of their extroversion is in their books, and in person they are, they're not very talkative. And then there are people who are some people who write books are talkative too, and then there are people who like do interviewing, where there are people who are expressing themselves, where it's a lot about themselves, as I'm doing here, kind of just it's out from you, so to speak. It's all you determining what's going on. To be a good interviewer, I think you have to kind of your ego has to recede, and it has to be more a task of listening to the person you're interviewing rather than being about, I'm going to tell you stuff. So a slightly different personality type and way of doing things. I think that what does it take to be a good science communicator? I think you have to understand what you're talking about. I used to say when we used to have technical writers, we kind of stopped in our company having straight technical writers, because what I discovered is let the person who invented the thing write about it, and other people can edit that writing. That's a much better way of communicating the sort of the real story than having somebody who is sort of a layer of technical writer. But back several decades ago, when we used to have technical writers, my 0th rule of technical writing is, if you don't understand what you're writing about, your readers don't stand a chance. So that would be my first statement about science communication. You have to actually understand the underlying material. The better you understand it, the more you're likely to be able to communicate it clearly. Then, in terms of the mechanics of communication, somehow some people learn to write well and some don't. And I've never quite figured out what it is and whether that's a learning thing or whether that's a people who think clearly can write clearly thing, or whether it's kind of a learnt trait. I think it's a large part people who think clearly can write clearly, although they need to know some mechanics of, having grammatical sentences and things like that. But I think that's easy compared to can you express your thoughts clearly? I think that when it comes to sort of being a popular science communicator, there are different kinds of hooks that different people use, and I suppose I myself have not been, for better or worse, much into those types of hooks. I mean, I try and do things like these live streams where I just sort of try and explain myself as best I can without kind of a lot of kind of shiny, what I might call gimmicks, so to speak. But there are other people who have a much more of a kind of I don't know, a particular sort of shtick that has some particular consumer communication, and that's something which, again, depending on the person, if you're a person who is great at just doing sort of cool physical things and going places and so on, then your YouTube channel can have you doing experiments or showing things and so on. If you're a person like me who couldn't get an actual physical experiment to work most of the time, then that's not a thing to do on your YouTube channel. But in terms of sort of the career side of science communication, I would say my impression is that there's quite an appetite for good science communication. It has moved away from the newspapers and magazines and more into kind of online media. But it's actually something that is in a sense the better for it, perhaps, because there aren't the same kinds of institutional structures that you have to kind of climb through to get to the point where you're actually doing the science communications.